this is the August meeting of the San Luis Obispo County Flood Control and Water Conservation District Water Resources Advisory Committee. First thing, we'll start off with introductions. So I'm Tom Burhan, representing District 4.
I'm Anthony Simo with Coral Engineers.
I'm here.
I'm Anthony Simo with Coral Engineers.
Lydia Holmes, Coral Engineers. Angela Ford, County Public Works. I'm Karen Bird with Public Property.
Matt Watkins, District 3.
Dara Landrum, City of Morbeck. Pretty hard. City of Beach.
Okay. Ed?
Ed Eby, Napomo CSD.
Jen Marks, City Council of San Luis Obispo.
Eric Greening, Environmental at Large.
Dave Beck, Environmental at Large.
Christine Mulholland, Environmental at Large.
David Crater, District 4 alternate.
Sunny's Kelly's located.
Dominic Rock, Coastal San Luis Resource Conservation.
Those were getting you this week.
Charles Barney,
Thank you, Charles.
Lee Nesbitt, EPC.
All right, Joey, we have people online.
We do. So for the folks who joined online, feel free to unmute and introduce yourself as I call your name, starting with Jenny Williamson.
Jenny Williamson, County Public Works, Water Resources.
Tom Cross.
Tom Cross, resident of Los Osos.
Jim Green.
Hi, yeah, Jim Green, Cambria CSD.
Matthew Scudato.
Good afternoon, Matt Scudato, Santa Barbara County Water Agency.
Jules Tuggle.
Jules Tuggle, Grover Beach City Council.
John Winstead.
John Winstead, Ag at Large.
Ron Munns.
Ron
Munns, Los Osos CSD.
And Ray Dienzo.
Ray Dienzo, Napomo CSD.
All right. Is there anyone else online who would like to introduce themselves?
Okay. Joey, introduce yourself.
Sorry. Joey Style, County Public Works.
Brendan Clark, County Public Works.
Okay, anybody we missed? Okay, do we have a quorum?
Yes, we do.
All right, so I think most of you are aware this is a special meeting, so we're going to dispense with our normal business of minutes and things like that. We only have 2 agenda items, actually 3, including public comment, but we have 2 major agenda items today. And the first one is a presentation by the DSAL team, so take it away.
Can everybody see all right, or should we dim the lights a little?
Yeah, we'll go ahead.
Joey's on. Yeah, that's great.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for holding this special meeting to receive a presentation on the DSAL plan feasibility study. We've already done introductions, but again, I'm Angela Ford. I'm with County Public Works, and I'm county staff helping work on this study. And then we also have our consultant team who will be presenting some today with Corolla Engineers and Public Collaborative. So here is an overview of the presentation. We'll go over project objectives and the timeline, alternatives evaluation process, and the rough screened alternatives. We'll talk about the cost for the alternatives with estimates, the benefits of DSAL, specifically economic benefits, summarize the community outreach and the public survey that we had out, discuss potential future phases of work, and then wrap up.
One question, this is procedure, but this is such a big thing. I'm wondering if it will be possible for us to raise questions along the way, on which we don't usually do, but there's so much to cover here. If we have to then go back again, I'm wondering if the committee would like that kind of a.
Maybe at the end of each chapter, if that
We
makes
have some,
sense.
we have some pauses planned in to take questions.
Oh,
All
good,
Okay,
thank you, thanks.
right, so first, the project objectives and timeline. Most of you have probably seen this graphic multiple times by now. This is a potential timeline for what we think it would take to go through planning and ultimately get to constructing a desalination project. It's a very long-term project. And I wanted to point out here, this is focused on desal. We're working under a grant from the Bureau of Reclamation. So this timeline doesn't reflect any of the concurrent efforts that are going on in the county to plan for other water supply or conservation measures. This is just focused on desal. And our ultimate goal with this project is to see what it would take to do a desalination project in San Luis Obispo County, if it's a feasible opportunity, and if it's one that we should consider taking. As a reminder, phase 1 of the desal plan was working with the partner agencies throughout the county to see if they were willing to be considered in the desal plan. So these, when you read the report and hear about our desal plan partners, these are those agencies who agreed to be considered in the plan. They are not committed to anything. We don't have any formal agreements or funding arrangements. This is just to consider those agencies and their service areas when we were working on the study. So we're currently in phase 2. And this is the planning phase. And since we got that Bureau of Reclamation grant, and that grant has a requirement that any of the scoped work be completed within 2 years, we opted to break up our phase 2 planning into a phase 2A and a phase 2B. So phase 2A was getting a consultant on board, starting to implement our public engagement, and then do the study to identify alternatives, vet them, get some cost estimates, and select a short list for further consideration. And then document all of this work from phase 2A in a USBR Title 16 feasibility study framework. So that gets us kind of to this first decision point where the desal plan partners can decide when and if to move forward with planning. And that would get into phase 2B, which is outside of the grant requirement or grant. And then that would be the more detailed studies that we need. They would be more site-specific analysis. And we'll talk more about that later in the presentation. So here's an overview of the feasibility study timeline. We started in early 2025, and over the past 2 years have been working on developing these alternatives. We've made a number of presentations to the WRAC and had community engagement sessions. We posted the compiled feasibility study report document to our desal plan website, and that's currently out for public comment until Friday. So if you haven't had a chance to submit yet, you have until Friday to please let us know what you think. And then on September 1st, we'll be going to the Board of Supervisors, and the action will be a receive and file. So that gets us to the alternatives evaluation process, and I'll hand over to Lydia.
Okay, great. So as Angela said, we've been here before. I don't expect you to remember everything that we've discussed along the way, but so we'll try to give a little high-level overview here, but we will pause for questions to refresh people's memory as needed. So to start with the refresher, an alternative includes several components. We need a site for ocean intake, outfall, and a treatment facility. We need to understand the size of the facility. In most cases, that was constrained by the existing outfall capacity to take the waste product away. We needed end users who are going to use this new water supply. And then we need conveyance to connect between the treatment facility and the end user. So all of these pieces really come together in what we're calling alternatives. So as Angela talked about, this study effort was really about identifying alternatives and narrowing that down to a handful that we could then develop cost estimates for. So we did a whole look at what are suitable sites along the coastline and did a site analysis, came up with 12 concept alternatives that with our partner agencies narrowed it down to 5 concept alternatives that we then developed costs for, and we're comparing those today. Again, we're not developing a preferred alternative in this study. We're just comparing the 5 alternatives that we narrowed it down to. And I want to give a little bit of explanation of the philosophy for the selection of those 5 alternatives. We really were trying to come up with a suite of alternatives that could represent different bookends that you might be wanting to look at. And so that ranges from size of small to large, geography from north to south, and then breadth of looking at maybe local only uses versus really having a very distributed system that goes throughout the whole region. So as we get into all these alternatives, you'll see that we were trying to cover all these different bases with these different alternatives. So I have a high level overview here in this table, and then we're going to dive into each one in a little more detail as we talk about the costs. But so these are the 5 alternatives. I'll run through them really quick. Alternative A was located in the Cambria area, serving Cambria CSD and San Simeon CSD, and it's a relatively small capacity. I'm going to talk just about the MGD, which is million gallons a day. So it's 0.3 to 0.5 million gallons a day is the capacity of that facility. Alternative B is a little further down the coast, and these are in no particular order other than geography. So we started north and went south. This is not like a preference ranking. So the next one down the coast is the Cayuga Estero Marine Terminal, and that would serve Cambria and San Simeon again, and also pick up Los Osos area, and then has a little bit of potential for some state water exchanges. And it's slightly bigger at 0.8 to 0.9 MGD. Then we move into the Morro Bay area. That one's getting a bit bigger. As we move into more central county, we're able to start making a more regional project because the outfall's bigger. So you'll see the size is 5.2 to 7 MGD, and we can start networking into more end users, including the city of San Luis, Cal Poly, and all the Lopez users, and then Templeton with some exchanges. Okay, and then moving down to alternative D.
This go off Cambria. Are you assuming that the building ban in Cambria is solved by this and it goes to full build out in terms of customer base? Because remember, a large part of Cambria, it doesn't have a serve list because they don't have enough water.
Yeah.
So are you designing for a full build out?
This ranged from an ask that they had up to essentially what their full use is. Yeah, the 0.5 is their full use, right?
The 0.5 is a portion of their groundwater use.
Portion of the groundwater use.
And existing ask, like a direct request.
Okay, you catch that?
Not quite, but
yeah. So the 0.5 million gallons per day is a portion of a direct request in volume that they said, oh, we could use X amount, as well as a portion of their existing groundwater use. Yeah, not full build out.
Okay, so sorry, I think I was on South Slow. So this is in the South Slow area, meaning South Slow wastewater treatment plant area. And I do want to say, because I know this is a point of confusion, we're not talking about locating it at the treatment facility. We understand that they have issues with Coastal Commission. This is just near there and using their outfall. And at that location, we again have a larger regional facility that goes up to San Luis Obispo, the city of San Luis Obispo, then ties over to Los Osos, there's Cal Poly, all the Lopez users, and you'll see this in maps in just a minute. So this is a larger option as well at 4.5 to 6 million gallons a day. And then our last alternative is at the Nakoma Mesa, the old refinery site. using an outfall that's there. That outfall is limited to the 1.6 to 1.7 MGD. So that's what limited that size to just being able to handle really the Lopez users and Napomo CSD and potentially Santa Barbara County for a small amount. Okay, so with that, Anthony's going to walk you through the cost for each of these alternatives, and there's maps on each one of these that will kind of start showing you how those systems are set up.
All right, great, thank you. So before we get into the specific costs of each alternative, I wanted to go explain a little bit on what makes up the total project alternative costs. So in summary, each project has two major cost components. We have soft costs and construction costs. So construction costs are the hard infrastructure, the facilities that are makeup of a desalination of these alternatives. So in addition to each one of the construction costs are contingencies, and those contingencies comprise of unknowns in the future or during construction, or just those very small details. So at this planning level, the contingency is fairly high at 30%, which is common. Additionally, we apply SLO County sales tax to an assumption of 50% of those costs based on sales tax and materials, as well as contractor overhead and markup during the construction. The contractor marks up things and whatnot. So for the infrastructure, we have some major assumptions to also consider, which the intakes are subsurface slant wells, and pipeline is typical open trench pipeline at master plan level layouts, no specific details. It's really just a layout, following general road alignments and whatnot. Pipes are sized for average annual flows, so we're not considering peaking factors, and our reverse osmosis or our treatment facility is a traditional ocean reverse osmosis facility, no alternative technologies or whatnot. And then the ocean outfall costs are based on other projects in California that size accordingly and similar layouts. So soft costs are representative of the construction costs, but they are based on these soft cost percentage factors, which you can see here. The planning is 5%, engineering design 10%, permitting and mitigation 10%, legal or administration and legal 5%, and engineering services during construction and construction management at 10%. Now those costs are a percentage of the construction costs. So for example, if I have a construction cost of $1 million, engineering design at 10% would be 10% of $1 million, 100,000. So a summary, high-level summary of the major cost components of the alternatives. You can see we have those different, the construction subtotal, soft cost totals. So the construction subtotal plus the soft costs equals the total capital costs. So that total capital cost number is the project alternative costs. And these are in millions of dollars, the capital M, million. And then we have the annual O&M costs. That's the annual estimated operation and maintenance costs. And that includes power, labor, time, chemicals, the typical operation and maintenance it would take to operate a facility every year. And then the max yield is based on, as Lydia mentioned, how much water these alternatives would provide. And that's an acre feet per year. And then the annualized cost is that, annualized unit cost is that unit cost of water ranging from $9,000 to $25,000 per acre foot. Now that represents the annual cost projected into the future. So there's a lot of assumptions on the projection variables in this calculation. But that's almost like the life cycle total, taking into account all the life cycle costs for the alternative.
What's the length of that life cycle?
30 years. Yeah.
How do you express the lower number in terms of rate payer? If you've got a service area, you've got a number of services. If you divide the number of people into these big numbers,
Mm-hmm.
what is it gonna cost the average household?
So for this study, we didn't go to that granular level of detail on looking at individual ratepayer impact. It's more of just the general of the total project cost and how much yield it produces. What is that production cost of the water? Not necessarily looking at individual.
Fundamental failure of the study, because the bottom line is going to be what comes out of your faucet and what you're going to pay.
Well, David, if
And it seems that wouldn't that affect the feasibility? If you had a per service cost that was very, very high, it'd be very unlikely that project would be adopted because the ratepayers wouldn't allow it.
Well, in further phases, in these types of projects is where they look at cost of service evaluations and financial impacts. But at this conceptual level, it's just seeing if the physical development of the project is feasible.
And I just want to jump, sorry, go ahead, Tom.
Okay, David, if I may, we don't know how much of this additional water from any of these would be used by each of the entities and how it would affect their mix of other water, which might be considered cheaper. So at this point, you really can't do the analysis that you're asking for. When you get to project specifics and look at how much water they'd be supplying to the individual entities and how they mix it with all their other water, then you can start doing the ratepayer analysis. So it's a little premature, I think, but it's a good question.
Yeah, very good question.
Does the unit cost include the amortization of capital costs?
Yes.
Over how many years?
30. All right. So one thing we wanted to show here is a comparison of these construction costs to other desalination projects in the nation. Now, the reason why I say the nation is because desalination projects are common. There's not very many of them that have been constructed, and you know, a lot of them have been constructed or they've been designed but not constructed. So what we did here is gathered several data points from other projects within the nation and plotted them with respect to how much they're producing versus their total construction cost in 2026 dollars. And so you can see there's a trend here. There's a trend that this data together follows, and the red diamonds are the 5 alternatives that we developed for this project that follow that trend. So knowing we're in the ballpark on the total construction cost with respect to other projects within the nation. So what I'm going to be showing here in the next 5 slides are the detailed maps of each alternative. And this is a little snip of the detailed table that Lydia presented a little earlier that shows the alternative, partner served, and the capacity and range of each alternative. But I want to point out this cost estimate table down here and the colored lines. These colors correlate to these arrows. So this Cambria pipeline segment is just representing this pipeline segment right here. This San Simeon segment is just that right here. And then anything in that treated water segment is really the shared infrastructure that applies really to everyone. This is not representative to what individual end users would pay, as we just discussed at this level. We don't really have that granularity, but we just wanted to show you the breakout of those infrastructure components for each alternative. So again, this is the alternative A Cambria area layouts where we're serving Cambria and San Simeon CSD. And so next, we have the alternative B at the Estero Marine Terminal, utilizing the existing outfall that's in that region, and having the 3 pipeline cost components going Cambria to San Simeon and to Morro Bay. Or sorry, to Los Osos. Yeah, through Morro Bay.
Can I ask, it seems like, I don't remember, but I thought at other meetings this was called Morro Bay.
That's the next one.
Well, no, I thought there were 2 in Morro Bay and this was also called Morro Bay.
There might have been 2 there. We used to have a small, medium, large Morro Bay alternative. Like we had a total of before.
Right, and I thought it was in Estero. Is this not in the sphere of influence in Morro Bay? It's in, so that was another one you were talking about?
That's this one, alternative C.
No, that.
Alternative C. the next alternative is the Morro Bay area alternative. This one is near the Estero Marine Terminal region.
Oh, okay.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So again, showing the different pipeline components and this one having a pipeline going up the one to San Simeon and Cambria area, then as well to Los Osos connecting and or a new pipeline that's parallel to the proposed Shore Valley connection. So then alternative C is the Morro Bay alternative. Again, this is a much larger alternative. This is the largest alternative simply because of the hydraulic capacity of the Morro Bay existing ocean outfall. And so this one is similar to alternative B, where we have a pipeline going up the one to the Cambria San Simeon region, as well as connecting to the Los Osos region. But the major difference is a large alignment that extends from that Chorro Valley, that parallels the Chorro Valley pipeline all the way to San Luis Obispo. And also being able to transfer water through San Luis Obispo to the Coastal Branch pipeline in order to serve users in South Slow County. And yeah, so one thing I do want to point out, I forgot to mention this, I'm sorry, is that these are the construction costs only shown here. So we're not showing soft costs. Those were shown on the previous slide, but if you're interested, we can show those.
Question about land costs.
Yeah.
For example, this alternative, as you stated, it's D, would require another location than the current wastewater plant. So is land acquisition cost?
So in these alternatives, land cost is, I remember including it. I don't think land cost was included because it would have been in the treatment costs. Mostly because the site isn't specifically selected. So again, that is why in these planning level projects, we have a much higher contingency to account for that unknown. Yeah.
In terms of land costs, the Carlsbad plant was dropped right next to Southern Cal Ed switchyard for a reason. And you're going real big here. You've got a switchyard in Morro Bay in the harbor. You don't have one in Estero Bay. Do you need a switchyard, or can you run this big system, massive system of the existing towers around there?
So that's a good question. And we did look at the power requirements. The Carlsbad facility is very, very big. These
10 times.
10 times the
size of this
yeah.
Morro.
So we're looking at anything, no larger than 7 million gallons a day. And we have a power consultant that we did work with, sub-consultant, and that we did evaluate the power requirements. And for the most part, the large transmission power lines seem sufficient to power facilities of this size, not requiring a full switchyard. Yeah. Okay, alternative D is the second largest facility, and this is in the South Slow County area. And again, just want to state again that this site right here is just an example. And those example sites are really used for estimating purposes. But this is right now, you can see ranging from 4 to 6 million gallons a day, sending water from this region here to connecting to the existing Lopez pipeline, being able to utilize that to distribute water to the users, as well as having a single alignment to San Luis Obispo, transferring water through San Luis Obispo to Los Osos at the furthest point, as well as in the southern portion, sending water to Napomo area.
Can I make a comment on measure on D?
Yeah. Yes.
I don't know if you're aware, I hope so, that the Coastal Commission almost 10 years ago mandated that the South County Treatment Facility start planning and researching probable relocation of the entire facility to a new plant that will be operational by 2047 to make it safe from sea level rise and inland flooding. And when you take into account the size of floods that can come down a road around a creek, that site is just not appropriate for a $500 million legacy desal plant.
Yes.
And they also, one other thing, they also directed the sanitation district that the new plant would be required to treat all municipal wastewater to tertiary levels, which would create 2,200 acre feet of new water in South County. How does that fit in there?
So
it wasn't mentioned anywhere in the report.
Yeah, so we know that there's a lot of issues at the South Slow County, the siting and the Coastal Commission. And we don't intend on citing it there, but again, at this level, we're not citing the facility in this study. That's just used as an example site for estimating purposes.
I'm confused. You're not gonna build it there, but you're gonna use the ocean outfall?
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
So how would you connect to the ocean outfall?
The idea would be to locate it close enough so you don't have to build a very long pipe to connect to that outfall. So I think proximally to the point where you build a pipe that was miles long, not 10 or 20 or 30 miles long to connect to that outfall.
Yeah, and there's, there, again, once that siting would be better finalized in the future, the actual infrastructure requirements to get to the existing outfall infrastructure could be defined as well.
Well, and I was just gonna say, I think that the Morro Bay experience is a great example of this. They had to move their treatment facility. They kept their outfall. You're not going to change the investment in your outfall.
Yeah.
So that's gonna remain. And so that's our assumption, is that we can use that existing infrastructure. It's going to stay there, but we were not proposing to locate anything new at the existing treatment.
Would you consider a hybrid facility that would also treat the wastewater?
Oh, sure, a co-location in the future might make sense. So if this alternative was selected and the CSD wanted to look at co-location opportunities, it seems like that would make sense.
Okay. And to answer your last question about the existing, the new water source with the tertiary treatment, it could be a new water source, but know that is treated completely different because it was wastewater. So this is creating potable water from ocean water, and that would be creating potable water from wastewater. So they would have different treatment facilities.
They don't both use RO?
At the end, they both.
At the end, but not in the biological side.
Right.
Is there a question over here? No. Okay, great. Yes.
The city of Fresno's been concerned with the capacity of the outfall and have submitted comments. The drawing, are you taking, it's feasibility, are you taking those comments apart, and it should maybe shared with the group, because, we're discussing the good and the bad, right? Or is this too soon for that?
Or the capacity of the existing South Slow County outfall?
Yeah, the owners and operators of the outfall.
Yeah.
Yeah, so first off, we want to talk, this is getting into the details of the management of how you would manage the waste product coming out of desal, which is RO concentrate. Our assumption all along has been that the outfall capacities are sized large because they need them for wet weather events. And we recognize that. So we would not want to be discharging during a wet weather event when they need to be used. Most of these outfalls are way oversized for what is needed on a day-to-day basis. They're only, so it's a fraction of the size of the pipeline that's used. So we want to use that excess capacity on a normal day, but we're going to provide storage or turn off the RO facility for the events during a 5-year storm when there's a lot of water in a wastewater plant where they need to use that capacity. So we're trying to build into the plan an avoidance of any conflicts related to capacity of that.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, yeah, now as long as we're doing some questions, I'll let them ask.
We're-
them. Thank you.
We were gonna pause right after the next slide. Can we just finish all 5 alternatives and then we'll take a few more? Okay.
Okay, so and the last alternative is alternative E, which is at the Napomo Mesa refinery site area. And the size of the site is dependent on the existing outfall capacity of the existing refinery outfall, that orange line in this location. So in that case, it's only able to serve nearby Napomo as well as a portion of the Lopez users, but it's utilizing the existing Lopez pipeline for distribution as normal. And there is a connection to Santa Barbara County if needed to deliver a small portion as well. And okay.
So we'll pause there.
Pause for questions.
But if we can take questions on kind of like alternative configuration
Yeah.
or cost, because after this, we're gonna switch gears and talk about like the kind of economic benefits of desal and then where we're going from here. So, so now's the time to ask questions about the alternatives.
Yes.
Thank you, yes. Couple of alternatives have these partners, desal partners. San Luis Obispo is mentioned in 2 of them as a partner. Doesn't look like San Luis Obispo is partnering to get any water. They're simply partnering to allow water to be moved in and out of San Luis Obispo and around San Luis Obispo as well. San Luis Obispo for years and years has had a policy saying we do not wheel water. So my question to our council member right here, Ms. Marks, Jan, my question is, has the city council ever taken a vote on being a partner in these 2 desal alternatives? Have they accepted wheeling water through the city to accommodate a couple of these alternatives? And is that something that the city is considering looking at in the public, or is that a done deal? Has it been agreed to already?
No, and no. So, basically, I told them last night at the city council meeting that we were gonna have this feasibility study, and I gave them the go link and encouraged my fellow council members to read it. And nothing formal has come to the city for any kind of decision, except that early on, and this is before I was on the city council, or before I was representing the city on the WRAC, actually, we agreed to participate in the feasibility study. So it's not, it's part of the conceptual thing.
So you're only a partner in paying for your share of the feasibility study.
I don't think they're paying for it at all.
You're,
But if you read the part that's about San Luis Obispo.
Jan, Christine, we have questions related to the presentation and the project. Please, if you want to discuss with the city afterwards.
I'm done with that. I have that question.
Do you understand though, that was a little out of the realm of what we're supposed to be doing right now.
Well, partners are mentioned there, and in figure 2.12 in the document is that thing about desal partners. And the logo is up here.
So these
These
are.
team can speak to that.
Yeah, so that's what I was trying to get to, yeah. If San Luis Obispo has had a formal buy-in to, in what sense to being a partner?
These agencies are what we're referring to as our desal plan partners. These agencies each executed, with the exception of Cal Poly, who has a separate coordination. But the agencies adopted resolutions agreeing to be considered in the plan. There's no funding. This feasibility study has been funded by the district and with support from the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. So these other agencies have not contributed funding, nor are they committed to contributing any funding or continuing with any project. There's no commitment. They just agreed to be considered in the plan. So that's.
And then they just gave a whole bunch of information about what they're doing, so it could be considered as part.
Yeah, that's correct. And Shauna Scott, City of San Luis Obispo, just also to clarify, thank you for kind of addressing the extent that we committed to this planning and feasibility process. And then as noted on one of the slides, there are these decision points where we go back to our council for policy considerations, commitment of funds. So all of that will go through the public process and will be required to be reviewed by our city council prior to any other further commitments. The other thing I wanted to address is where we identified potential needs. We looked out into the future past, say, 2050, and looked at where we have sufficient primary supply, but we'll need maybe some additional supply for our secondary water supply. Or if there is a very extended drought, a drought that extends over 6 years, or there's some catastrophic infrastructure failure where we're not able to receive our water from our source water bodies. So we looked at these different scenarios looking decades far into the future. And so there are some commitments where we would receive those deliveries in addition to wheeling, which requires approval by city council, transfers from Nacimiento trading with North County. There was different kinds of alternatives that we looked at just to really in this planning phase to look at the feasibility of those potential alternatives.
Yeah. And my question is about the methodology for determining costs.
Yeah.
What assumption is made as to whether the water is also treated, in other words, chlorinated or something like that, as a cost factor? And if the decision is made for long distance movement of chlorinated water, does that cost factor include probably higher cost pipeline standards that are needed to prevent spills of chlorinated water into streams where living organisms are?
At that level of detail, the water is assumed to be chlorinated only to meet, it's really to meet Department of Drinking Water standards. And so at that level of detail, looking at potential spills of drinking water, we didn't.
It's no different than
any pipeline.
your water system in any town.
Correct.
That's the assumption.
Yeah.
So you're comparing it to like municipal type pipelines rather than long distance pipelines? Municipal, I mean, I realize we have the coastal branch of the State Water Project, which is extremely unusual in the regional treatment and so on. And that was very controversial a couple of decades ago. And so I'm asking, compared to pipelines, are you comparing it to municipal pipeline systems, or are you comparing it to long distance conveyance systems?
So at master plan level costs, such as this in conceptual, it's considered, it could be any type of conveyance system, but the costs account for those unknowns. So they don't specify the material, they just specify that this is just a pipe installation assumed on a traditional installation, traditional method of construction of a certain size.
On the low cost side or the high cost side, if those things are unknown?
Well, we have that 30% contingency included, which is a fairly high contingency.
Thank you.
Yes.
Is Morro Bay the only partner that didn't need water?
Morro Bay.
There are other partners that did not make requests.
But
Need or want or two.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so what we did is we sent a survey out to all of the agencies that requested, answered questions about where could you see desalination, a desalinated supply in your portfolio, and some did respond, some did not.
Okay, and then maybe you're gonna talk about it later, but I'm unclear where the land side of this is in these 5 areas.
In what context?
Like where the plant is actually.
In this study, we did not look at specific plant locations.
So they all have potential to have a location? I don't know how much land is required for each of these sites.
The land, It's dependent on the size. Desalination facilities are not that large. Like compared to a traditional wastewater treatment facility, because there's no biological treatment, everything's membrane treatment, so a lot more compact. For these, we looked at sizes, just potential layouts, but we didn't look at specific sites. So again, the site really depends on the configuration of the facility. So again, we didn't look at that detail in these layouts, like site detail.
We are not picking sites
No,
for any one of the alternatives.
Yes.
But there's no idea of how large of an area.
Oh,
Minimum.
yeah, no, there is, yeah. I just.
Minimum.
Oh,
The report says 12 acres from Morro Bay.
12 acres.
Yeah, in that side, I read it today.
And I don't know
Some
where that
villages.
would be, I don't know where that would be, so.
They haven't identified.
yeah, and like, yeah, so it could be up to that big, but again, depending on the size and configuration, things could change and what would actually be included.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have one question about the refinery. Is there a date, timeframe that the refinery is supposed to have cleaned up its mess?
That when the refinery.
Have they started doing much out there?
Oh.
I know they've been one here today. Where?
Are you talking about Morro Bay? Are you talking about
the
You have to go back and ask for a person in planning that's tracking that.
I have information on that in terms of they have taken it off the market. And they're going to stay owners and controlling through investigation. This report by their freezing from a potential purchaser of it.
Yes.
The cost per acre foot.
Yeah.
Dollars, it was basically 9,000 to 25,000.
Yeah.
Was that in 2026 or was that like in 2040 or 50 when this might come online?
So that calculation for the annualized unit cost follows the Bureau of Reclamation economic analysis standards. So what it does include is it includes the O&M projected out 30 years, as well as a annual debt payment for financing of the capital cost for 30 years. And then it brings it all back to present day dollars.
Okay.
So yeah.
That is present day dollars.
It is, correct, yes, but it includes the projected values.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know one of the questions was like, what does that mean in terms of rates? Which is a pretty complex question.
Yeah.
But just for the room's edification, right now in San Francisco County, surface water costs around $1,200 to $2,500 per acre foot. Groundwater is cheaper than that, but most public agencies in our county are paying currently between $1,200 and $2,500. Just so you get a order of magnitude understanding of how these numbers compare. What that cost will be in 20, 40, or 50, likely higher. How much higher? We don't know. How sustainable groundwater is at that point. Well, just for some context.
So this might be a great time for us to move on to the benefits, and then we'll come back and ask more questions later. Or let you ask more questions later. So thank you, Peter. That was a good segue. Because these are high cost dollars, right? This is not cheap water. So one of the things that you do as part of these bureau studies is an economic analysis, and we are not economists. We tried to do the best we could with some data from other locations, but you're looking at what is the economic benefits of doing desal, because they recognize for any large project that you have to understand the benefits compared to the costs, and you want the benefits to outweigh the costs, right? So what we did was look at some countywide key economic indicator. The report shows that the gross regional product is almost 25 billion. There's 1.6 billion in sales tax quarterly. There's 100,000 jobs, and tourism is 10% of the economy. So that's both how much is spent and, or what the economic part is 2.4 billion, and the number of jobs supported by the industry. So one of the biggest benefits that we see in a desal project is avoiding drought impacts. And so I'm going to kind of lay out for you how we came up with avoided drought impacts, the benefits of it. So starting with history of drought, hopefully you all, this won't be a surprise to anyone, but this region is very drought prone. This is a series of maps show from the United States Drought Monitor that shows the status of drought in California and the region. And from 2014 to 2025, there was a total of 8 years of dry to drought condition, nearly 67% of the time. It was extreme to exceptional drought 30 to 40% of the time. So we talked already about the economics. We look at the life of the project as being a 30-year project. So over 30 years, if that 30 to 40% of the time prevailed, we would be having 9 to 12 drought, extreme to exceptional droughts. So we're expecting many extreme to exceptional droughts over the life of this project. So the benefit calculation is then to what can we benefit from avoiding drought impacts? So we really drew on past studies in California, and there's a study that shows that reductions in water from 15 to 30% really leads to reduction in economic output by 0.8 to 6.7%. And then the city of Ventura showed that a 20% water cutback resulted in a 5 to 10% reduction in tourism dollars. So using this information, we tried to apply that to San Luis Obispo County and said, okay, if we had a 20% water cutback, which is about 6,500 acre feet a year based on current total use, we would have a reduction in tax revenue from the reduction of economic output of 2%. So that's a $32 million loss. Reduction in tourism by $240 million, and losses in tourism, job losses in tourism. And I'm kind of running through fast, because I know you're reading faster than I can talk. But job losses in tourism is just really an estimate. We're saying, let's say there's a 5% reduction in jobs, and those are of people who are only working half time anyway, so that we only did 20 weeks a year, and that would be a $20 million loss. So these are some estimates of basically economic cutbacks that would happen from a, yes, sorry.
I'm waiting for you to finish.
Okay, no, I'm before I go on to the next slide.
Yeah, okay. On page 510, talking about Ventura, 20% cutback. There's a typo you might want to check. You have 510.
Yes,
Yeah.
we got that from someone else.
Okay,
thank you. It's 5,210. 510% would be really difficult to achieve, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so in addition to those economic activities in the region, there's also costs to utilities for having to manage a drought cutback, water curtailment. Again, using Ventura, they have documented that it costs them $235,000 for a 20% curtailment, and that's really to have people go out and monitor how often you're watering, and public education and billing, and all these different things. So we're assuming that that's probably representative, and we applied that to the 16 partner utilities, assuming that if everyone was on board and participating in a project, they all would be facing a 20% cutback during a drought and would have to be administering that. So that comes out to $250,000 per year per utility, or $3.8 million. Then we also have from another study that's been done that there's economic benefits to households from avoiding water curtailment. And anyway, we're doing the 20%, and based on, again, offsetting that 20%, it ends up being a $16 million impact to households. So a lot of different economic studies that we're drawing on. This is none of it's ours. I just want to be clear on that. We're just extrapolating from past studies to say, how could maybe it impact you? When we add this all up, so the first row is the economic impacts of the water supply shortage, where it's the tax revenue reduction, the tourist reduction, which is the big one, and then job losses. Then we have the avoided expenses of managing a drought curtailment. We have household losses, it's called consumer surplus. And when you add it all up, it's a $311 million cost or avoided cost if you don't have a 20% water shortage. And that's 20% water shortage. So then we can start saying, okay, we said there's going to be between 9 and 12. Let's just look at 2. Let's say we avoid 2 droughts, 20% droughts. We don't have to cut back by 20%. And that's going to add up to double the 311, so 622 million. Our largest cost alternatives, and these are just capital costs. I wasn't trying to capture the annual annualized costs, but the capital costs of the 2 larger programs or projects were between 483 and 544 million. So you're essentially seeing that with 2 avoided droughts, your benefits are outweighing your costs. So you have essentially paid for the cost of building that facility by avoiding drought. Okay. That's all I have on benefits, and I'm sure that was a little bit confusing, so I will pause. Yes.
So your last statement there is buried in paragraph 5.4.1, and in my opinion, that justifies the whole thing. Why isn't that in the first line of the executive summary?
We could add it to the executive summary. I do have to say, and I apologize, I think I've said this in past WRAC meetings, a bureau reclamation has a very specific guidelines of what is supposed to be in each section. Right. And so it's a little clunky, but yes, we could add it.
Read the executive summary, and that comes across that you're checking boxes for the bureau's reclamation requirements for grants submittal. But you have 2 customers. You have the bureau, and you also have the board of supervisors. The board of supervisors are going to decide whether this goes forward. So,
and they may not read the whole document. They will only read the executive summary.
And people like us who report to them, Tom and I at the district board, if you don't put it in the executive summary, then we're going to have to put it in our own executive summary. Okay. And I think that deserves some consideration.
Absolutely, we can put that in there.
It seems like the benefits are aggregated, but they're not distributed that easily. So I think there's a need to qualify that estimate.
Yes, and I want to be absolutely clear. We did the best we could on the benefit analysis, but it's a little premature to be doing this benefits analysis because we don't have a selected project. We don't have committed partners yet, right? So that's one of our recommendations, is to do once you have a project or projects that you want to proceed with and you have partners that are committed, you would want to do a more thorough economic evaluation. And that would include things like rate impacts and, right, and what's the specifics for each of the different partners, because some partners have a more critical water supply shortage issue than others. And so their benefits are going to be larger. So, right, there's a lot of detail you could dig into, but we had to stay pretty high level at this point. Yeah, go ahead.
The sales tax. If you look at the sales tax for the drought years in the county here, to see whether there was a drop in sales tax.
We did not dig into the economics.
You're kind of relying on Ventura, but you're local. I mean, we've got all these years here with the economic impacts right there in the tax returns. Wouldn't that be a good thing to put in?
It would be, but it was really beyond the scope of our study to dig into.
So you're justifying this project right here on the basis of that sort of thing.
It's what the supervisors would probably most want to see before they make their decision.
Well, you're claiming that you're saving money that will be lost because of the drought by having desalinization. You can't show, or you should be able to show that there was a loss of income in the county during those 4 years of intense drought. I mean, so the numbers you probably look up on the internet.
And in addition, a rise in expenditures, things like fire suppression and so on. So
Sure.
there's a total picture, total fiscal picture coming in and going out. I have a feeling the board, that would be what the board would consider most relevant.
So that would be part of phase 2B, the subsequent kind of planning and studying. At this conceptual level, it's just too hard. We don't have a single project that we could identify or the breadth of its impact. So these are important considerations, but right now, kind of using what Ventura did to give us a ballpark for a range, but we wouldn't be able to commit to a specific amount or even like a more dialed in. We're at like what, level 5?
Yeah.
Cost estimate. So it's very high level.
So at the risk of using a very bad pun, at what point and who would pull the plug on this? Like, at what point do we say the water's too expensive? The users aren't really interested in Hartford. I mean, when I don't get the long-term goal of this, because bottom line is, who needs the water? Who wants the water? Who's willing to pay for the water? And those are all things, and I don't mean to be contentious, I'm just giving you some positive feedback from a business angle.
And those are all critical questions, and those are exactly what we have put in. You'll see some slides of those questions need to be answered in the next steps.
Yes. And so again, going back to the original, at what point does our governing body, like the Board of Supervisors, say we've gone too far? We're not too far. We've gone far enough on this now, and the grant goes so long. So I'm wondering where these decision-making points really are.
So this study kind of marks the end of phase 2A. We're going to be presenting it to the board on September 1st. That would be, they're just receiving and filing. If we are going to be, looking at further study or doing a deeper dive in any of these alternatives, that would be going back to the board to be giving us the authorization to go forward with those studies. So I guess on the first, they could say, all right, thank you, you've done enough, no more planning. Or they'll say, thank you, and we'll keep with looking at water supply going forward, not just desal, but we've got different efforts going on, and bringing those to the board as appropriate for them to make the decisions on.
So the next decision-making point is when? Can you give me any time frame for the board?
Well, on the first, that would be an opportunity for them to say, stop looking at desal, right?
Yeah, we'll have staff and give staff direction, and they can give us direction or not give us direction. And
right.
I think the other big part of it is all the water agencies, whether there's one or more that want to move forward. And so we would react to them, and we have a forum for continuing to talk to staff of the other agencies and see what they think.
And then the funding, right? It's a discrete grant funded feasibility study. And so then you're looking at, if you want to move forward, are you looking at seeking more grant money? Or are you looking at contributions? There's a whole lot of avenues that are unknown as to whether or not and how it goes.
Yeah, and part of our presentation to the board is to comment on all these other water resiliency efforts with Massimino, State Water, et cetera, recycled water, et cetera, are going on in parallel. And our continued forum for continuing to coordinate with all the water agencies about, okay, let's let that play out, or do we want to, this could take a long time, so let's not lose momentum. If there's more grant opportunities and, agencies are willing to cost share, because the next phase of more detailed studies is going to be probably pretty big, expensive, and it may be invasive if we have to do ground testing for the feasibility of the horizontal, wells. So those are the kinds of details I think that we'll need to continue to discuss with the water agencies to gauge whether we recommend to our governing bodies whether to move forward or not on any of these alternatives. So I think, I don't know, maybe you have slides on that, but.
Yeah, we have a little bit of what the next steps are, but the next segment is, I'm gonna, just for interest of time, because we've already exceeded the time we were supposed to be presenting, I'm gonna just we'll finish up the slides and then we'll open up the rest of the time for Q&A. And I promise that Carolyn will keep it fast. Keep it fast and just do a quick update of what we did on engagement.
Yeah, I'll give a high level, since we saw you, we wrapped up the second survey, so I'll give you really high level themes, but I know what you really want to get into our next step, so we'll spend the final moments on that. Looking at this whole effort that you've been a part of from the beginning until today, just wanted to give you a snapshot of what community engagement did we pursue throughout that. So throughout this whole process, we've been putting updates on the district's DSAL website, putting up relevant documents for the public to review, updating frequently asked questions, doing email blasts and social media and the like. So that kind of went throughout the heart of the whole study. We've had a virtual public session in September 2025 and simultaneously an online survey that was held open for about 3 or 4 weeks. And then we did 2 in-person public sessions in April, one in Morro Bay and one in Grover Beach. All of those sessions, various notes and presentations and all of that posted online. And then we just closed out with a final survey conducted since your last WRAC meeting until a few weeks ago. So just to give you a snapshot on the purpose of the second survey that we conducted, part of it was to educate and inform. So some people are just becoming aware the study's going on. So this was an opportunity to educate folks about the study and water resource planning in general. While also soliciting input. We wanted to start gauging public perspectives around broadly regional water supply, as well as specifically ocean desal as one option for water supply strategy. And really use this as a chance to start bubbling up priorities, concerns, and information needs that the community sees. Also, really, I'd say the underlying purpose is to inform future communications and engagement. So what's the community thinking about that might help all of you and the agencies as you move forward? So we got 355 responses, which is great. And the little footnote there is the engagement wonk in me wants to say this is not a statistically valid survey. This is just those who self-selected to take this. So it's really those who are interested in water and desal and took the time to take this 10-question survey. Headlines for you. So 3/4 of the respondents recognize that we don't have sufficient water supplies to support the future needs of our region. 82% of those who responded are interested in continuing to explore and invest in water supply infrastructure. So that's broadly the future of water supply, not necessarily desal. Most respondents, I'd say just with the handful that aren't familiar, everyone else was at least somewhat familiar with ocean desal. And this final point, I'd say about 3/4 had a somewhat to positive impression of desal, while 1/4 of people had a somewhat to negative impression. So just good information you all keep in mind as you continue talking about this as a community. In terms of what the community, we asked, what would you need to feel more informed about a conversation around desalination as one option for water supply? So these are the top 5 requested topics. Cost comparisons among water supply alternatives, environmental permitting and marine impacts is a big topic, regional water supply needs and resilience, so kind of understanding the big picture of what desal fits into. That's the next one. So how desal fits into that diverse water portfolio. And then the final point, which you're all starting to touch on, is what are the next steps in the planning process? How do people stay involved and what does it look like to make decisions on each subsequent step? We asked which sites would you be interested in seeing go into further study? So it could go into phase 2B. So there's interest across all of the 5 site areas. Strongest interest was in the 2 South County options, but there was interest across the board. I would say there was also opposition to a number of sites. So take that with a grain of salt. Here are some of the major themes. Again, 355 responses across 3 open-ended questions. So I'm just capturing some of the high level ones. I think what struck me is there is an openness to ocean desal with further study. People really wanted to see that it's been well understood and compared to other options. People sought in-depth information and they want comparison of how this looks compared to recycled water and other opportunities. There was strong understanding that our water supply is tenuous and that action should be taken. Individuals had different actions they thought should be taken. Some were no growth, some were desal, some were recycled water, more conservation. So that ran the gamut. But I think what struck us is people see the need to improve our water supply resilience. There's concerns, as you've expressed in the past, with energy use and the sources for that energy, cost of desal as it compares to our other water supply strategies that might be implemented. And then we just read underneath the comments that, and some people asked for this, needing more education around desalination. So people want to understand better the plants, how they operate, what would that look like in this community, regional community. And then anything that's implemented, we heard over and over again, needs to be protective of the ocean environment. Most interest, as I said, was in South County. And I do want to note at the bottom, I think in particular, some of our North Coast respondents were strongly opposed to the Morro Bay site. So that it is a thing to keep in mind as you continue these conversations, if you do. And this will tie into what Lydia's about to go over, but some of the takeaways as you think about communication and engagement in the future. So you can see up here, of course, naturally you'd want to look at desal compared to other water supply strategies and help people understand that. You'd want to explain costs and trade-offs and funding considerations. I think there need to be clear information on helping people understand marine impacts and also environmental permitting and review cycles so that everyone has a common understanding of that. And need to help people understand how does this fit into a planning context, who are the partners, what are their roles. All of that is left to be determined, of course, as Courtney just mentioned. And then finally, this is really important, and we heard it a lot in the sessions as well, but need to expand to the extent any site moves forward for further study. There would need to be a much more focused outreach associated with that. And you'd want to think both potential host sites, so the community that would be hosting a project, as well as the partner agencies considering being involved. So really needing to do a deeper dive into community conversations if any of these alternatives were to move forward.
Yeah, we know that Los Angeles is in a critical situation. It's talking about putting a pipeline up South Bay Boulevard and connecting with the California water along the Charter Valley. Also, Canberra is in a critical state. In your surveys, did areas that are in critical water supply futures that know they're in a critical situation like Los Angeles, are you putting them ahead of others because the need is so clearly there?
In terms of public comments being considered?
Yeah, and your whole way of approaching this thing, that it would weigh heavily on an option that would supply Los Angeles with extra water. Anything that did that would be good for Los Angeles.
Yeah. Well, in our original putting the alternatives together, we did try to think about those utilities that have critical water supply needs. So that's why you see that Cambria is in quite a number of those alternatives, right? Because they do have a very tenuous water supply. So, should they do one on their own or part of the stereo terminal or, right? So we included them in several alternatives, recognizing that they may be willing to try to get funding to take a long pipeline up to them because they need water supply, similar with Los Osos. So we did try to take into account those who had more tenuous water supplies and pull them into more alternatives if possible. But in terms of the public outreach, we're not weighing any one voice more than others.
So, yeah, I had a question about, we do have a federally recognized marine sanctuary, the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary. That's a federal designation, NOAA and all that. then we have the Bureau of Reclamation, that's a federal agency. I'm concerned about, any consideration of any, desal operations within that marine sanctuary. So my question is, did you reach out to NOAA? Did you reach out to the local Chumash tribes? Did you reach out to the Stanford professors who are doing all this research there to see if that would even be allowed? I mean, if I could wave a magic wand, I'd say absolutely nothing in the marine sanctuary. So was your outreach just narrowly focused on people who live in these various communities?
No, so we have also spoken with NOAA, and they've indicated that their permitting would likely coincide with, like, if we're able to meet coastal commission's requirements, then they would likely be on board with that. So, we're not excluded from, continuing to look at a project in the marine sanctuary. We did also reach out to the tribes. They were part of our very early engagement to make sure that they were aware, and will definitely, if and when a project were to continue moving forward, there would be more involvement there as well.
Does this amount to activating formal SB 18 consultation, or does that come at a later stage?
That would be later.
Because I think the legislation does say at the earliest feasible stage, that it's usually earliest feasible stage once a project is being defined and before it has been completely defined. So that can be read all sorts of ways.
Right.
Just be aware that real consultation isn't just letting people know something is coming.
Correct. And we've also offered to meet with and did speak with representatives of some of the tribes. So those who wanted to continue.
And there are multiple bands.
Correct. Yes.
There's no Chumash, Washington, DC or Salinan, Washington, DC that speaks for everyone because they've always been governed on the village and village cluster level. So that continues to this day.
Right. So we got the contacts from other team members at the county who have done the formal consultations and have the contacts for each of the entities. So we reached out to those that we were able to identify.
So federally recognized bands, the only one that's Chumash is consent to ES, and they were not directly involved in the whole preservation effort. And they're not, I'm not sure if they're actually represented, but that's, there's federal recognition of tribes versus the reality that they exist and they have existed all the time.
And SB 18 does not require that a tribe be federally recognized.
Right. So we
requires that it basically demonstrates that it's here now and organized.
Engagement went beyond federally recognized, right? So it's a good point. Okay, the engagement.
All right, last question, and then I'm gonna finish up the slides and check with Tom on our time for finishing up.
Well, I'll just, a quick footnote, and then my question, that NOAA right now is taking public comment on the Trump administration's desire to wipe out federal consistency rules and federal and state coastal management zones. So the field is in flux. With regards to the environmental portion of the report, it took up about 5 pages. I can tell you that in Oceano, the concept of environmental justice is huge. It is huge for the Coastal Commission. And I was honestly disappointed that there was no mention of environmental justice in the entire report.
And we recognize that that is an issue, again, because we're talking at a very high level. I think it's something we can add as something that needs to be considered for future evaluation. Once you start narrowing down who wants to participate and where would you locate it, and then would engage more in the local communities.
Are you going to modify the report based on the input you're getting from the public?
We are going to think about what needs to change in the report.
You will?
Yes.
Before you submit it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna just jump through these slides really quick, and these are very similar, if not the same, to ones that I shared the last time I presented at WRAC. But so this is all about what is next steps, and really in the near term, and we've already talked about a lot of this in our Q&A, there has to be partner agreements and memorandums of understanding with agencies that want to have a project move forward. And that doesn't mean that you're constructing a project. It means that they want to keep considering the project. Because as we've talked about, it takes decades to plan and design and build these facilities. So if we don't start down that road, it for sure won't ever happen, and you won't have a new water supply. So whether it's desal or any other kind of water supply, it takes decades to implement. So we just have to start that journey. That's my little pitch. So narrow down the alternatives. So again, once the partners are engaging and saying, yes, we want to keep studying this, need to select a couple alternatives. Probably don't want to keep 5 for additional investigation and determine who's participating for each project, which partners. Are there going to be other people who were not signed on as partners originally, like the groundwater sustainability agencies? They have their own mandate to be getting to sustainable water supplies, and most of them do not have a good plan for how they're going to meet that. And would an additional water supply in the region help? Probably would. So they are another partner that can step up to the table if they're willing. Economic benefit study, we talked about that. Really, it needs to do a deeper dive than our chapter 5 in the report does. And you would look at it both in terms of, that it's something that's very useful for going out and getting funding. The funding agencies want to see that you've done an economic benefits analysis and that the benefits outweigh the costs. So that's, and then also it's a useful tool for talking to the public and talking to partner agencies on that there is benefits to a project. And then we just talked about the need for additional community outreach and education, and that's not just public, it's also tribes, it's to local communities that may host, right? It's, there's a whole host of education and outreach that needs to be done. Then once that's done, then you can kind of start trying to dig in a little bit more on some technical stuff, like maybe do some piloting of alternative technologies or do a demonstration project. Courtney mentioned drilling wells to start better understanding the hydrogeology of specific areas. All that needs to come after the first step of let's get everyone on board because we want to keep studying it. But there is definitely additional site-specific investigations that are needed. And then at the same time, you would need to kind of what we were just talking about, the environmental, there's a whole bunch of permitting and CEQA work that needs to be done. And to do that, you have to have a little bit of basis of what your project is. So that's why we have a basis of design report to better define the projects that would then be used to inform permitting agencies and environmental impact. You can't really take a project to a permitting agency at the level we're at now. We can talk concept with them, but until you have a specific project, they have nothing to react to. And then governance, financing, funding, negotiations, that that's going to continue throughout. That was in the first as well. It's really just continuing to work on who's going to run this. The questions this lady was posing of, who, what, when, where, how, right? All that needs to be defined. Who's going to operate it? Who's going to fund it? Is there a JPA that has to be formed, or is it an individual agency? So there's a lot of stuff that needs to be worked out. And then long-term, you actually start designing and constructing and operating. And this is almost the easy part compared to the first 2 phases. So that's it for that. I want to just do a quick wrap up of our study. We already mentioned this, but the public comment period is open until Friday. It's at the county's DSAL website, and the final report will be posted and presented to the board on September 1st. Okay, so that's all we have on slides. I don't know if you want us to take more questions or if you want to move to the next agenda item.
5 minutes of questions.
Okay, so 5 minutes more of questions.
Has any?
Go ahead.
Back to the benefits to a community like Morro Bay, because that's where I'm from. that doesn't really need the water, we're doing injection wells and stuff like that, what is the benefit to a community?
Yeah, and there was a great comment, we were having a discussion before the meeting started, that I think that one of the things that I would like to add to the report is that there is a benefit to a local host community in that it's going to create jobs during construction. You can hire local contractors that can help build the facility. That's, of course, temporary jobs while the facility is being constructed, but there's also long-term jobs of running it. So you're going to need operators, maintenance people, so it would provide, not a ton, but probably a handful of good, well-paying jobs in these communities.
The other thing I would add that's a little bit harder to wrap your head around is the benefit to everyone in the county when it comes to long-term resiliency and reliability of other sources. So when a new source is tapped, then that puts less strain on existing sources. And so even if not a direct beneficiary, or even a direct contributor, certain agencies like Laurel Bay might benefit when its neighbors around it no longer have pressure to access groundwater or other surface water sources.
And having redundancy in your system or reliability in your system also allows you to do some of the maintenance. I mean, I think a lot of times water and wastewater utilities are always, trying to just get by and not able to take things down and do the maintenance that's needed because they don't have an option to run something else. So it having a more redundant supply, maybe that is not always used, but maybe more for drought, would allow you to say, oh, we need to do a major repair on the whatever, Nasi line or the state, right? And be able to, okay, we can take that down because we have another source of water we can use during that time.
Well, for us, that's the IPR, that's the.
Sure, right.
Is that like, do you mean like that would be environmental justice, more along those lines? Like, I mean, because environmental justice, because of Morro Bay being, having the power plant and,
Yeah, I was not addressing that in my answer to your question. You were asking me.
So
what the benefits
you're saying the
were.
benefits are the temporary jobs and then the plant, the potentially 12-acre plant jobs full time.
Sure.
Thank you.
And there are, I mean, you can be creative about this too, right? A host community could say, well, if we're going to do something, we want to have some other benefits to our community. And so maybe we want to work with our local resource conservation district and do some, restoration of a creek or, right? I mean, you can pair things together to have mitigation for the impacts to your local economy and local, community. So, just, and honestly, those types of things make it really attractive to funders. So if you're looking for alternative grant funding, you want to package together other benefits and have community support.
Yeah, it seems to me that the focus is entirely on urban consumption of water.
Yeah, great
And
question.
There's the whole question, when you look at the effect of droughts, I mean, it really puts a lot of farms out of business, and cattle farms, but also orchards or, you name it. And so one aspect that, I don't know, it can be included at this time, but would be if there can be a trade-off in that the desal water would be available for urban consumption, which might free up possibility for surface and groundwater for farming.
Yeah, and we struggled with this, and this is where I think if you do a more detailed economic study, you could do a deeper dive, but there certainly is benefits to other users of groundwater basins if you have a supply that helps alleviate a little bit of the demand on that groundwater basin. It would be difficult for us to be able to estimate what the impact of agriculture is from a monetary basis, but sure, if right during a drought, urban users can not use their groundwater basin as much, and that's something that the ag continues to rely on, I would think that would help overall water sustainability and
I think the Farm Bureau might have some data for you.
Well, certainly there's data out there on the regional Yeah, well, how much agriculture contributes to the county, but it's hard for us to be able to carve it out with not having a specific project of which basins contribute how much and how much of a benefit there would be. So we really tried to leave it as, this is something that could be a benefit, but we're not trying to put a dollar to it.
Two more questions, David and then Christine.
This may be a silly thing, but what if a development comes in and says, I want you to put so much capacity into a plant and pipe it over to Wild Cherry Canyon or something. Harvard Trust is going to put 100 high-end homes in there. Is there a possibility of this getting out of the sort of government control network and getting into the private water exchange? Because I know that Carlsbad is selling its water now. So just wondering whether that's a possibility, that you could end up with these desal plants becoming semi-private for development.
So we have in, well, I can't remember which appendix it is, but we have an appendix that Dan Heimel at Confluence put together for us. It's in the report that talks about governance, and we talk a little bit in there about there are different delivery and governance models, including you can do a public-private partnership, or so you're right. Carlsbad is a private company that came in and developed this. They got contracts with San Diego, Water Authority, so that they would have a consistent demand, but that's another path you could take. So certainly an option.
Christine. Go ahead.
Please, I have a question. It comes out of chapter 3.4, and it makes some assumptions about offsets, and perhaps you can help me understand it a little more. The study assumes desal could offset existing or create new uses. And it also assumes a 25% offset of state water project water. So is this assuming that we're going to take the more expensive water and not use the cheaper water in some certain situations? Is that the offset? We're gonna offset by saving the cheap water, the margarita or state water, and go for the, I didn't quite understand the whole intent there.
So this goes back to like where we try to make the benefits. So we're looking at drought situations, and I think we have a whole thing in chapter 3 or 2 about state water. So 25% cutbacks in state water is not unfounded assumption, right? So when you're in a drought period and you have that kind of state water cutback, and you have cutbacks of Lopez water for maybe not just drought, but because of environmental flow and other reasons, or algae blooms, right? So each of the supplies in the county has some vulnerability that can cause a cutback. And so that's what we were looking at, is like, what's a reasonable assumption to say what kind of cutbacks might happen, that this could be a supply that could help provide that stopgap. So we recognize that, this is natural. Everyone's going to always want to use their cheapest water supply, right? So it's not that you are forever going to be using this in lieu of that, right? It's, that's something that has to be a strategy that is figured out for each retail agent. Each utility would have to say, we want to take a little bit all the time and more in drought, or we want to take a lot all the time. I mean, that's really to be figured out.
Okay, thanks. That helped. That offset term was, when you're going to offset, that helps.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, desal team. Good job. We'll move on then to our next item, and that is the consider sending a letter to the Board of Supervisors suggesting and recommending that they receive and file the report. And wrote this letter, and Brendan was happy. They really were helpful in putting it into the proper formatting. Trying to make it as broad and simple as possible, because we have to understand, I think it's been explained today, that what the Board of Supervisors is going to do on the first is just receive and file. We aren't making other decisions. And so the question in front of this group is, do we want to recommend that they do that? And that's what the letter would state in its present form. Steve?
Yes, Tom, I want to say that I appreciate the way this letter was drafted and brought to us. I think it's clear and simple, tells what the advisory body has done over time, tells that, yes, we've looked at it again. We recommend receive and file. I think that this says everything we need to say as far as I can tell.
So you want to send it without the optional section?
I'm fine with it.
I had stuck in the optional section, because I think that was suggested last time that we have that in case there was some burning issue that we could get enough a majority to say, add this to the letter. But I didn't see anything today or any comments that would rise to that level. Again, the board won't be making further decisions or other agencies for some time in the future, other than on September 1st to receive and file. So we would take that out, and I think I would probably change the title to the final report, because I understand now that on September 1, we're delivering the final report, not the draft. Correct.
You can say that we reviewed the draft. And
Review the draft.
That you
Receive and
file
the final. Eric?
Yeah, I would be a little more comfortable. Maybe this is just, I'm reading too much into it. If, where it says, as an advisory body, the WRAC is not providing an opinion or preference for any of the 5 project concepts at this time. To simply jump from the word opinion to at this time. Otherwise, they might be trying to parse it out as, are we going to pick one of the concepts, or as, are we still, wondering whether desal at all, it can be read both ways. And it seems to me that all that's needed in a basic generic letter is WRAC is not providing an opinion at this time. So I don't know, it doesn't bother anyone else, but I would just be more comfortable with that streamlined wording.
Data creator than Mary.
I would, find that by saying we are providing an opinion. Our opinion is that we reviewed the work that has progressed, and we have no fundamental issues with the quality.
I don't think we need to say that we haven't come to an opinion. If we don't say anything, we haven't come to an opinion.
Okay.
I think it's, I had to focus that you're not doing something.
Okay, Mary, then Donald.
Just want to know, is the board really asking? I mean, that's really the bottom line here. I'm not asking our opinion.
Are they even making a decision, or are they also going to be receiving and filing?
They are making a decision to receive and file. And I expect the reason they put this body in place is to advise. So I think they have to ask every time to say, please advise us, as they may on occasion. But I think we have an obligation as a body to anticipate what they might want to be advised of and act.
I appreciate that your statement says we're not providing an opinion on the projects and selection of project. If that's perfectly stated, then we would recommend any change.
Okay. Any other comments? Somebody's got to make a motion.
I move that we forward this letter that WRAC reviewed, the draft sound plan. Recommend the board set the final and receive and file.
Does that mean these two
Wait a
paragraphs
second,
are
Eric.
nothing below?
Eric, we have to see it's, I believe there's a second. Thank you. Now we can discuss.
Okay, there's a motion in the second maker, and say we're sending these 2 paragraphs and not anything that goes under optional section. And that's what the motion is about.
That's right, we crossed out after our vote of the draft detailed study. No options.
You okay with that? Yes, that's what I thought. Yes. Patricia.
And we're sending it to a board that's also receiving and filing, and that can ask for more opinion, for an opinion when they're ready for it.
Yes, go ahead.
That's
If I heard you right, you would eliminate these areas of, that would go away.
The optional section, yes, that was just,
However, I think somewhere it should mention that there was much discussion and many questions. I think the board deserves to know that.
yeah, I did put that in there that they answered questions and seek comments, but, so I could add a sentence saying there was much. discussion.
Something that indicates there was a lot of conversation in the room about this, and it doesn't just seem like we sat here
Right.
and didn't interrogate what's going on, because it's important they know that.
I mean, I think the site sets are based upon the presentations discussion at the meeting to the subcommittee.
And staff will be presenting this item, and I think they can highlight the lively discussion.
We could add 2 words where it says, and engage the RAC members to answer questions and seek and receive comments.
Well, it also says here the meeting included a focus on the draft study and identify and evaluating potential. It says, it's right there, a focus study, that's what we did. It was a focus study. And
I think we're close. We may not, achieve perfection in wording,
I think-
but the question is it good enough to go to the board and garner a majority of.
Would add those 2 words or not.
Which 2 words there?
Where it
I
says,
think it's.
and engage the RAC members to answer questions.
Dominic, if you could hang on, we need
receive
more.
comments.
Okay.
Engaged or having, we don't have a. I can take it or leave it with that. I think that this is a fine letter. It shows the intent. It's quite simple and clear. And this is, we reviewed, please receive and file. It's just clear as that.
We don't need to tell them about our deliberations or lack of deliberations or opinions and.
Yeah, all of that.
If they cared about that, they'd come to these meetings here.
But let's not ask for something we don't want.
As the process furthers down, we'll have.
Should we,
Inform our opinion, then we'll have.
we have a
I call
motion,
for the
okay,
question.
we have a call for the question, we have a motion and a second. I'll ask Brent to do a roll call, so because some people may want to abstain.
Just to clarify, so the motion is to send the letter as you have written, except excluding the optional section.
Excluding the optional section and changing the word draft to final in the last sentence of the second paragraph. It reference the final report, not the draft. Because they'll be in the supervisor beginning the final report. I was unsure when I wrote this, if they were going to get a draft report or a final.
One quick question to the consultants, based on what we've been discussing today, are you going to modify any of the slides that we've seen today? Because then that becomes a change. And I'm just kind of wondering what's going to change on this.
We have called for the question. That's a completely different issue on how the slides are going to be.
Give her a quick answer.
We're not changing slides, the slides is not going to report.
Okay, very well.
And any changes to the report will be just minor edits to try to provide some clarification based on that.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. If there was
Yeah,
questions,
nothing
would be making some changes.
Thank you, Mary. Right, would you call the roll? Brent? Yes. Matthew Watkins?
Yes.
Tom? Yes. Patricia?
Yes.
Mary? Christine?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
David? Yeah. Thank you. Dominic? Steve?
Yes.
Lee?
Yes.
Eileen left. Sarah left. Marshall. Jane. Ed.
Yes.
And Lori. Did I miss any members who are present? Okay, thank you. Thank you. And then the last item, any public comment on items not on the agenda? Not seeing any, then we'll see everybody in 4 weeks for our regular September meeting. Oh, Joey, go ahead.
We do have one question online. That's
Yes.
a public comment.
Oh, public comment, yes.
I'm sorry. Tom, you should be able to go ahead and unmute.
Hello, WRAC, members of the committee. I want to thank the presenters of the presentation, and I want to excitedly urge the committee and any applicable water partners to further consider alternatives C and D in the future. Although there seems to be a lot of public pushback in Morro Bay, I think with a more thorough and in-depth analysis, specifically with residents in Morro Bay, it could potentially hold water. And if, no pun intended, and if even after all of that, there is still significant public pushback in Morro Bay, alternative D would be a fantastic secondary choice that can best serve the entire county and community. Thank you very much.
Anything else?
I would also.
Christine.
Staff.
Yeah.
All of you for your presentation.
Nothing else, we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for coming.